Says we're live.
Yes, we are live, and I'm trying to get it here on Instagram, but it's not working.
Oh, that's all right.
Okay. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Pick My Brain Fridays. And I am so pleased to have with me today Jeff Webb. And I'll ask Jeff to introduce himself, of course, before I, miss some very important information. But today we're going to be talking about recruitment and AI. And just the name AI frightens me. And I can imagine how it's frightening everybody else. So, welcome, Jeff. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation for this edition of Pick My Brain Fridays.
Oh well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So yeah, let me just introduce myself. So I'm Jeff Webb. I'm a fellow Canadian, and in my day job, I'm the global talent brand leader for Organon. So that means I do a lot of the employment branding as well as our future talent hiring globally and our DEI and B as it relates to recruitment for Organon, which is a global women's healthcare company. So we focus on a bunch of different areas, therapeutic areas for women's health.
Great. So, before I start asking you any question, Jeff, how did you get into recruiting and then transform yourself from a regular recruiter into AI recruiting?
Yeah. So I mean, like most recruiters, I think I didn't go to school for recruiting. I went to school for HR, and then I sort of realized that I didn't have the aptitude, I guess, and the skills for an HR generalist. I've always been more of a salesy type of an individual, and so the sales arm of recruiting the sales arm of HR is really recruiting. And so, because you're selling a company, you're selling a job, and that kind of got me into recruiting, where I actually probably spent the least amount of my time in my career in an actual full desk recruiting role, because then I went more into the sourcing world, which is really more about, headhunting, the real headhunting, right? Where you
Right.
would call somebody up and ask them if they would be interested in coming in for an interview, that kind of stuff, finding candidates, those diamonds in the rough. And then it was sort of a natural progression from there to employer branding, because all these tools came out. Speaking of AI, all of these tools came out, which made it really, really simple to find people
Hmm.
that would use algorithms, and they would scrape the entire web, and they would find your profile, and then they would find your profile in a variety of places, and then they would, put two and two together and figure out, oh, this is Daisy Wright on LinkedIn, but also Daisy Wright on Facebook, but also on X or Twitter or whatever the heck we call it now.
Hmm.
And they would do that, and so it made it really easy to find people. That wasn't a hard thing to do anymore. The harder thing was, how do you convince them to come and potentially be part of your company? So that was really how I transitioned into the branding side, was getting more involved in engagement with candidates. And then, recently I've become very interested in this whole world of generative AI. So I think there's three main types of AI, right? There's very simple AI, which is, I would classify more as automation. You
Hmm.
know, things that you can do with systems to move one person from one step to another and things like that, right? They don't learn from each other. They're just automations that you run.
Right.
And then there's the sort of the AI of putting algorithms together and putting profiles together and putting skills together. But then there's this whole new world of generative AI, where so GPT stands for generative pre-trained trainer.
Hmm.
And basically what that means is that you've pre-trained an AI on 2 or 3 million documents, and then it learns as you talk to it. So as you talk to ChatGPT and ask it questions, it's learning from everybody else in the world who's doing that, the millions of people who are doing that. It's learning every day more and more and more. about how to interact with humans. And so, there's been this kind of amazing, amazing acceleration in the entire world of AI, right? We went from 5 years ago, nobody would have thought it was possible to have
That's
something
right.
that could talk to you. And then today we've got these AI assistants that literally sit everywhere and they talk to us like real people.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard to discern whether it is a real person or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think companies will start to leverage that more and more. And I think it's already started. So in this, not so much in the recruitment space, because recruiters are, by their very nature, a little bit slower to adopt these technologies.
Right.
And HR is as well. But in the places like customer service, I mean, you never know. You could be talking to an AI next time you call a customer service agent.
Absolutely. Yes, I saw a demonstration of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, where I had a guest at the end of April. I had a guest she's a professor at Miami-Dade College, and she actually showed us a video of an AI person actually going through the full customer service exercise with a bank client from the moment she said hello right until the transaction was done. So it's happening for sure.
Yeah, I think, and I think we'll see just more and more acceleration. I think I saw an article today where, one of ChatGPT's competitors came out with the new version of their next version of AI, and it could, I think they tripled the computing power of this AI through some very complicated quantum computing mechanism. They managed to triple the brain power of this AI from what exists today with ChatGPT, and that was only in a few weeks. So you can imagine how this is going to accelerate.
Right. I actually read something this morning, and it probably is the same thing with Claude. Is it Claude?
Yes, Cloud. Yeah,
Yes.
Cloud. Yeah.
Yes, I read it this morning. Yeah. So let me ask you the first question.
Sure.
Here, Jeff.
Yep.
I am personally curious about how AI is integrated into your hiring process. Like, could you explain the specific ways AI is used from screening resumes to the final interview?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think AI is used in most hiring processes as a companion tool, right? So what I mean by that is that it's actually probably more helpful for the applicant today, which I think a lot of applicants think it's the other way around. They think that AI is going to screen them out. AI is more likely to screen you in. So what AI does is it looks over your resume or your profile. Let's say you apply with LinkedIn, or you apply with Indeed, or you apply with your resume. It'll look over that, and it'll look at your skills and your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then it will derive a number of other skills that it believes you may have had, but may have missed. So sometimes people, as you know, Daisy, people are not always great at writing resumes, right?
Right.
They don't write all their skills in there, or their transferable skills. So AI looks at that, and then they'll give you a score based on what are your actual skills and what are your inferred skills. And inferred skills are basically skills that it has pulled out of its multitude of resumes that it has in the back end and data, which, it gets from LinkedIn, it gets from other sources that it says, most people who have done this job have this skill set.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've done the job successfully for a long time, chances are you have that skill set as well. And then what it does is it will then give you a score based on that skill set. Now, some recruiters, they look at that and they take that at as rote, but some recruiters, they like to do their own screening anyways. So they'll kind of go, oh, the AI scored this person as an A. I think they might be a B. So we actually try, and from an ethical perspective, we try and stay away from that, right? Because that introduces bias into the process.
Right.
And we don't want to introduce bias into the process. We would like to stay away from that.
Mm-hmm.
So we really try and encourage recruiters to look at the scores and to kind of read those as, as the best sort of screening mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
because again, it's trying to be more inclusive, not less inclusive.
Right. Okay. And having said that, how how can candidates ensure that their resumes pass through the AI screening?
I think a lot of times it's really trying to think through the skills and competencies that you've gained while you were in that role. So I think overall there's going to be a big shift in the next couple of years or a few years
Mm-hmm.
in terms of moving more from an experiential hiring experience to a skills and competency based hiring experience.
Yes.
And that's actually, by the way, mostly driven by AI, right? Because we wouldn't have the ability to know what somebody's skills were,
Mm-hmm.
or to inferred skills were, without AI's data set.
Right.
And so making sure that you are very mindful about the skills that you exhibit within your resume will help to open up other opportunities for you, right? So it's not just about listing those skills. It's also being mindful about what skills you actually decide to demonstrate in your documentation, right?
Right.
So for instance, I have somebody who reports to me. She started her career in accounting as an auditor. I would not recommend that she put audit or accounting on her resume, because she never wants to do that again in her life. Hated
Oh.
every last second of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, most people would be like, "Hey, you know what? You should include that because, you had like 5 years as an auditor." But I think in the future, no, don't include that, because, you don't want to be an auditor. You don't want a recruiter calling you for an audit job. You've no
Mm-hmm.
interest in that.
Mm-hmm.
So really, that's why I'm saying be mindful about it and actually think about the job that you want and what skills would be required for that job. And by the way, you can always ask AI. You can actually get AI to help you out with this, right? You can say, "Hey, ChatGPT," or "Hey, Copilot," or Microsoft
Or
Gemini.
Gemini.
Yeah. You could say to them, "I'm applying for this job," and you can actually put the URL of the job in. What skills should I highlight in my resume to help me get this job?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll tell you.
Yes, yes, I know that happens, and you and I had spoken the other day about that. But just to go back to the person whose experience was in auditing, but then doesn't want to do that in,
Mhm.
because at some point that person would have had to put that on the resume anyway, in terms of saying, well, for 5 years I worked with ABC company. How
Sure.
would they not? How would they not refer to that particular experience? How would they eliminate, say,
Yeah, I would
auditing?
I
Yeah.
would I would say that they could basically just not mention that skill set in the resume. Now
Mhm.
again, the AI is going to infer some skills, right?
Mhm.
So it's a bit of, here and there, right? It's whether or not but I mean, the vast majority of your experience, if you want to be, let's say, an HR generalist, then you should speak at greater length about that experience, right?
Mhm.
Because you're more likely for the AI and for the recruiter, who's kind of a human AI, to, pick that up and say, well, this person did accounting for 5 years, but really the bulk of their experience and their passion seems to be around HR. So,
Mhm.
we're going to screen or hire them in a more of an HR role.
So that's where the transferable skills come in then.
Yes. Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
if I work primarily in accounting and I'm applying for a job in HR as an HR generalist,
Mhm.
what would be some of the skills that I would include in my not only my resume, but say for Chat GPT to
Yep.
kind of, yeah.
I would include some of those transferable skills, like excellent communication skills, excellent organizational skills, compliance skills, because HR is a lot about compliance, and so is
Mm-hmm.
accounting.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that you could actually you could see as transferable skills, right? If you were going to make that leap.
Right.
Um, And again, you can literally go to any generative AI and ask them, what are the transferable skills between my current role and the role I'm trying to get into? Or like, and the other thing you can ask them is, am I missing anything, right? Do I need to take any training? What would you recommend for training for me? And I think, again, we're not there yet, but over the next few years, you're going to see companies start to kind of help candidates map that out for themselves, right?
Right.
So you're going to start to see job listings where you can tap on the bottom and say, tell me how I get here. And it's going to say, oh, you know what? Here's where you are today. Here's some recommended courses, maybe some mentorships, maybe some gigs that you can do that would help you fill those gaps. That would then, help you get that job.
That's very interesting. Very, very interesting. Which brings me to another question. And I wasn't ready to ask you that yet, Jeff. But for people like me, or even yourself, you're involved in recruiting. I'm a career coach, and within the work that I do, I help my clients to, develop their resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profile, and all the career marketing collateral. How do you see us functioning in this AI space? Because I've spoken to a lot of my colleagues who are pretty concerned that, you know what, it seems as if AI is going to really take away my job. What would you say to people like myself, career coaches, recruiters, career professionals, and all of that?
I think it's definitely, I don't think that AI is ever going to take away anybody's job, right? And I hearken back to the time where email was introduced. And everybody in the world was very worried that email was just going to completely wipe out people's jobs. The reality was it didn't do that. It created more jobs. And also it created different kinds of jobs, right? So for people who are in the recruiting space, the career coaching space, I think what AI allows us to do is take away some of the more menial tasks. It's an assistant for us, so it can help us kind of be more strategic, right? Now, if you really if you're in recruiting and all you do all day long is set up interviews, schedule interviews, yeah, you might be worried, right? Because that's not a high value task to give to a human. That's something that you can easily pay an AI to do. But I also look at it as I don't think that's a high value task for a human to do. Right. I think that's probably taking somebody's potential and not letting them live up to it. And so, I would rather have that person involved in elevating the candidate experience, something that really only a human can do. So I think, as kind of a, talent attraction community, we're going to have to sit down and think about things which actually provide value to people and things that can be done at kind of an AI level that can be duplicated or replicated.
Right. And you know what? I usually think about the times how we moved from, say, the IBM Selectric typewriter to the computer. People were concerned initially, but then as we look back, we have not only seen the number of jobs that have been created, but even in terms of productivity. When you jump I remember typing on a Selectric typewriter, and if I made a mistake on it, I literally would have had to retype the whole thing. So I think that's how I look at AI, and I'm an early adopter. These tools come around, and I'm jumping on them just to see what they look like.
Yep.
And one of the things I tell people all the time is that it doesn't make sense we resist it, because as Borg says in Star Trek, resistance is futile.
True.
So resisting, may be futile, but the reality though is that people are concerned, and I'm glad you're saying that. Yes, some people may lose not so much their jobs, but lose some of the things they used to do because
Mm.
they're menial, mundane, and we give those to AI and allow us to do more productive work.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being more strategic is really what it's all about, right? I mean, even when I think about, the hiring leaders I've spoken or hiring managers who are leaders that I've spoken to, the things that they want from recruiters today aren't the tactical tasks. They want recruiters to be consultative. They want recruiters to be strategic.
Mm-hmm.
They want them to say, hey, by the way, if you're going to hire, 15 of X skill set, this is the better place to do it because the talent actually exists there. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's they don't want the McDonald's recruiters anymore who are just kind of going, hey, do you want fries with that? They really want us to be consultative.
Right. Exactly. So the next question here is how can job seekers use AI to research companies and even their employees? And I asked this question because I asked you that question when we were talking the other day, and you gave me this fascinating story of someone who literally researched. I don't remember if you said they use AI to research the role, like research the company and then research right down to the role. And I was really fascinated by that. How did that happen? Like, how like
Yeah.
send the
So we've had a few candidates who have in the past few months who have come in and kind of have researched us, researched our employees as well, and the roles, and really all they've done is they've said, they've gone into ChatGPT or they've gone into one of the ChatGPT
Mhm,
competitors, and they just said, tell me about, and they took the job URL from our, jobs.organon.com
mhm,
slash, director of regulatory affairs. And they put it into the search end or the chat, the AI, the generative AI, tell me
mhm,
about this job and a little bit more about Organon as a company. Now we're a new company. We're only 3 years old. There's not a
mhm,
lot of stuff out there about us. But they really came prepared. And I think this was actually somebody at the intern level. But they came really prepared with, an idea of what Organon does and how our values align with their own values. And again, it's very simple, right? You go into one of the generative chat platforms and you say, tell me a little bit more about this job, how my skills currently match with this job, and then tell me a little bit about the values of the company, and then how my values match with the values of the company, right?
mhm.
So for instance, we're a women's healthcare company. If you are a misogynist, you're not going to do very well at our company, right? You wouldn't want to come work for us. And so if women's healthcare is not something you're fascinated in or interested in, you probably don't want to work for us, and we don't want you to work for us, right?
Mhm.
Because that's our entire vision. And so this individual came in and said, here's this value that you have. Like one of our values is, own it. We have another one called Bring Your Fire, where we talk about, really being passionate about the work
Passionate,
that you
yes.
do. And they said, oh, Bring Your Fire really resonated with me because I'm passionate about all the work that I do. And I'm really passionate about specifically, and there was a specific therapeutic area I think that they were interested in.
Mhm.
I'm really, because my mom has had this particular condition, and we were kind of like, oh my god, that's so good,
Yes.
because it's almost like you're interviewing somebody who actually already belongs in your company, right? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of times, in the old days, you used to sit there and go, okay, you have had C++ experience for 5 years. Like, I can read that on your resume, right? I
Yes.
don't I don't care about that anymore. I care about how passionate you are about the work that you're doing and how excited you are about it. And because those make the best employees. And if you can come and blow my socks off because you've researched, then you're already like half a foot in the door.
Right.
It's much, and it's so much easier to do these days.
It is. I was just about to say that because, gone are the days when we would be researching a company and we would have to find a physical annual report, we would have to do all sorts of other things other than, and it would take us a longer time to find the information we're looking for. Now we have this tool that we can plug information in, put the proper prompts in, and get all this information in a matter of seconds.
And you can have a conversation. So the great thing about generative AI is that they'll actually give you an idea of the next prompt you should be asking, right? Usually at the bottom, it'll say, oh, and how would I fit in with this culture? And you just press the button and it starts to answer the question for you, right? And so then you can read all of these responses and you can kind of cherry pick what you want to bring up during the interview, depending on, who you're interviewing with, all that kind of thing. And also, I think it could help a candidate come up with some good questions to ask during the interview process.
Right.
And some meaningful questions to ask. Like everybody always asks, what are the goals of the first 6 months within this job? Right. And I'm kind of like, okay, like everybody asks that. That's pretty. I could tell you, but somebody just read what color is your parachute and then asked the question. But if they came in and said, okay, so my experience is this, and I'm hoping to get here, and how is this experience going to lead me to that kind of role? Then I'd be like, that's a really good question. I don't know, but let me find out the answer for you. But again, just that, that shows passion. It shows excitement. Right? It shows that they're thinking about their future. And for me, anyways, that's more important than, asking me what am I supposed to get done in the first 6 months. I'm like, I don't know. I'm not the hiring manager. Ask the hiring manager that. I have no idea what your role is, what they're going to expect you to do in the first 6 months.
Okay. So that's a good point, because one of the things I tell my clients when we're going through the interview coaching process is to ask a question similar to that. What would you like to see me achieve in the next 30, 60, 90 days? But what you're saying is that reserve that question for the hiring manager, the person who is probably going to be my manager,
your direct manager,
your recruiter. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's kind of like it's a rote question, right? Everybody asks it. So, as a recruiter, you've heard it 1,000 times and your eyes kind of glaze over and you're like, okay, well, again, they probably read what color is your parachute and they're asking the question that's, in there. Right. So, so I think there's always an opportunity to really ask questions that are about you owning your career. Right. I think that just shows a lot more engagement than kind of asking rote questions.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's very interesting and a lot for us to think about. But here is one question that I would like you to answer, because it's a question that I have myself, and it's how do you address bias in AI recruitment tools?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying that different AI tools were trained or pre-trained differently. So if you were to use the internet, and Gemini actually did this comparison. So the original Gemini that was put out was trained. One was trained on the open web, and one was trained by the same set of academia that GPT trained on. The one that was trained on the open web was very biased because the internet is not a nice place. Right. I mean, you get a lot of people being hateful. You get a lot of keyboard warriors. You get a lot of, just bad things in general. Right?
Yes.
So, they I think there's a very famous video where they asked the first generation of Gemini trained on the internet what its biggest concern was. And it said, well, I'm really kind of concerned that eventually robots will eradicate humanity. And they were like, oh, well, that went dark pretty fast. I mean, like it was like just like that, right? Whereas the ethically trained AI was kind of like, look, I'm not worried about things. I'm really just here to help humans be better humans, and for AI robots to be better robots, right? Like that was its primary mission, if I put it that way. So you can't train AI on the internet. It's not going to turn out well. So a lot of the generative AI companies began training based on documents in academia because they are inherently without bias. And I would say that bias, by and large, is a human thing. It's a human construct, right?
Yes.
We're the ones, and by the way, nobody was ever born hating anybody. It's something that they learned.
It's a learned
Um,
behavior.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And I think it's also, lack of bias is a learned behavior as well, which is why it's important to always keep talking about it. So when an AI looks at your resume, they don't care about your skin color. They don't care about your sex. They don't care about your gender identity. They are inherently non-biased because they don't have the emotions to be biased. Bias is a human emotional construct, and AI just doesn't have that. And so, in fact, a lot of companies are starting to use or thinking about using AI to reduce bias in the work in the hiring process, right? Because if we're treating everybody equally based on the skills, experiences, and competencies that they have, then there should be no bias involved in that process. Bias, as I said, and I'll keep on saying it, it's a human emotional construct, and it's not something that machines understand.
Yes. I want you to expand a little bit more on that because I can understand, what you're saying in terms of, it not being AI itself isn't biased, but I'm thinking of the fact that of the people who actually develop these AI tools. They're gonna develop them based on they're gonna see through a different lens. So for example, if a tool was developed primarily by a white male, as an example, then it and let me say first of all that we are all biased, like we all have it. So it's not that because you fall in one group then you're not. We all have our biases. But I'm just saying, because it's information that you put in, based on what you put in, that's what you take out. So I'm thinking if someone, and you know what, not even say a white male, really. So let me use another example. Say, for example, a job description, say, I'm looking for somebody who is a ninja, or somebody who is energetic, and those kind of things. Right there, it could be seen as a bias. It could be bias against women, bias against, it could be age, because if this age, then saying I'm looking for somebody who is energetic might deter a very good candidate. And I'm just using those two words as examples. It might deter somebody, a good candidate, from applying for the role. So how do you, and this is more about job description and how
job adverts.
Yes.
So I can only speak to Organon, right? When we build our job descriptions with the help of AI, we always include a prompt saying using inclusive and SEO optimized language, right? And so that tells the AI that we want to make sure that we are not excluding anyone based on the language that we use.
You're right.
In the job description, right? So it's not too female oriented. It's not too male oriented. It's not too, it's not using, I guess, code words that are, systemically racist or biased. And so we do that, but we have a really belonging is at the core of our culture, right? So it's one of our primary values. And so I don't, if it were another company who, was inherently misogynist, could they use AI to try and attract a more male audience? Sure, they could, but that's not the AI. That's the human who's using the prompt, right? The AI has been trained on, again, largely academic documents, which are by and large not, biased, or they're less biased than, other sources of information. But, it is us who are driving the end result. And so will we get rid of bias in the conversation? Probably not. I mean, humans have disliked one person over another since we first crawled out of the sea, I guess.
Right.
So I'm not sure we're ever going to get rid of that.
No, we're not.
But I think we've made strides. And I think, people are more aware in 2024 than they were in 2020.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this brings me to another question. And it really relates to the bias as well. So one question is, in terms of interviews, do you in your organization, do you use any AI tools at any stage of the interview? So
We
that's
don't,
question one.
don't today. No. The only, I think, and the only place where we would probably insert it into our process is at the scheduling stage, right?
Is that at what stage?
The scheduling, like helping
Mhm.
hiring managers schedule because one of the things is what we found anyways, is when we do that with humans, it can take 2 to 3 weeks to schedule an interview. And by then the applicant's kind of like, oh, what the heck happened to
What's
this
happening?
job?
Yes.
Right. They're confused, they're frustrated, and it's not a good experience for them. When you use AI, you can get that down to about 3 minutes to schedule, an interview, which is it's fast. And that's kind of and candidates we've heard want the interview process and the selection process to be as quick as possible.
Right.
So we're trying to use AI where we can to reduce friction, but humans, I think, have to do the interviewing. They can be guided by the assessments that are done by AI, but I think, at the end of the day, you have to have a conversation with somebody to see whether or not you're going to want to work with them.
Right. And you know what? Yesterday I was, as a matter of fact, yesterday and today, I attended a virtual conference of the Ontario Labor Market Conference. And they were talking about AI as well. And one of the pieces that the gentleman referred to was a tool, an interview tool, and it's an AI tool that companies are using some have used it to do the full interview, or at least 3/4 of the interview, and others have used it as a screening tool. And I know a lot of people are concerned about that. One is that they see it as so impersonal, because they are not like you and I. Even though we are here virtually, I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. But some of these they're answering questions to like a blank screen, or a screen that shows them.
Oh, like yeah,
right.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there's opportunity for, AI to be used for like note taking, summaries, creating interview notes and passing them on to the hiring manager through those summaries. Like, again, all the menial stuff that a recruiter would do. I think we can take that all away and allow them to focus on having a real conversation with somebody about, how do your career goals and your values align with the company. But I would never replace a recruiter with an interviewing tool. I just think that would be a huge miss. Because I mean, I don't know how well an AI could educate somebody on the values of a company, other than just kind of saying it by rote. Like, you just don't see the excitement in their eyes, right?
Yes. Yeah. The piece that the gentleman is talking about, at least one of the things that I actually wrote out was, and the title of that particular segment was AI and the Future of the Labor Market. And this tool is called Micro One. I had never heard about it before. I just heard about it yesterday. And it's used primarily to recruit engineers.
Interesting.
And yes, and on it says more than 100,000 people have gone through Micro One screenings with hopes of being added to its marketplace of engineers. And the company lists a number of tech companies, and they name some companies that have, among those who have used its system to screen or hire engineers from its marketplace. So and they say as many as 30,000 candidates. It handles up to 30,000 candidates a month. And that really struck me because and it was an article, it was based on an article in the Toronto Star that says your next job interview might be with an AI cartoon doing the interviewing.
Right.
So, and I mean, it may sound like a joke, but it's serious because lots of people are concerned, and there are tools out there. There are AI tools out there that are doing the interviewing at different. I don't know if they're doing the entire interview process, but that's scary because, like you say, it takes away the human element. If I'm going to be, staring at a screen and it's asking me questions and I'm answering them and, not knowing what's going to happen after. So that's a little bit frightening to me.
Yeah. And I think, just if I'm thinking about it from somebody who advocates for candidate experience, I don't know that that's the best experience for a candidate. Because, I mean, one of the things that we hear from candidates a lot is that they really would like to speak to a human as soon as possible, right?
Yes.
So again, I think if you really, you have to take generative AI and you have to run it through the optimal process. And you really have to look at automation and AI as a way to accelerate that optimal process. But you also have to look at it from a user-centered design perspective and say, okay, well, if candidates hate talking to a machine, then why are we forcing them to talk to a machine as early on in the process, right? I mean, we'll probably get a whole lot more of them just dropping out and saying, you know what, I'm not talking to this stupid machine. I want to talk to a human. And so I'm not going to continue with this process. And, that's never a good thing for a TA organization. You actually want more people in the pipeline, right?
Exactly.
And a more diverse pipeline. So by, I just don't see the use case for knocking people out early on.
Well, I wish, that a lot of people would be saying what you're saying, Jeff, because like I said, AI in itself is scary, right? And then when it comes with this added piece, of this impersonal piece, it really can turn candidates off. So let me move to another question that I have, and it's around soft skills and cultural fit. So can AI accurately assess soft skills and cultural fit?
So this would be an easy one to answer, I think. So I would say no. So again, it's these are kind of emotional and sort of emotional, things, right? Whether or not, you can communicate effectively it's by its very nature, it's not a cut or dry thing, right? It's very contextual. And so I don't think AI is not in a place today where it can make the determination between a great speaker and a not so great speaker, right? To them, all it knows is, you use words and you seem to string them together, and that's it, right? It doesn't really understand that you're using, alliteration correctly or not correctly. You're using the right tense. It doesn't really care about any of that. And values, that would be very difficult for a construct, an AI construct, to understand, right? All it could ask is, do you believe in this value? Yes or no. It's a very binary response. And so I don't think an AI can really figure out, Daisy's really passionate about career coaching versus, somebody else who maybe is less passionate about it.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. And, it's a matter of, just re-emphasizing the fact that AI, it's great, but it has its limitations,
Sure, like anything, right?
like
I
anything
mean,
else.
if you're always trying to email your 92-year-old parents who don't know how to turn on a computer, and then they call you and they're like, you're like, I sent you 16 emails about this, and they're like, I don't know how to turn on my like, that's just not, that's a limitation of that tool, right? Somewhat a limitation of the person as well, but I mean, it's also, you're using the wrong tool for the wrong reason.
You're right. Okay. Well, listen. Oh, hold on. I see some comments here. Somebody had a question. I'm going to show the question here. A LinkedIn user. Okay, here's a question. Would candidates be penalized or rewarded if it is determined that their job application was created by AI? That's a great question, and I don't know who the LinkedIn user is, but that's a great question.
Yeah, so I guess that depends on the organization. So I will say I'm not going to speak for everybody who's in TA and say, yes or no that they would be. I guess the bigger question is, how would you determine if their job application was created by AI or assisted by AI at all? A lot of these generative AIs are so good that it is indistinguishable from a human writing it. Right. I think the only time where it would be kind of weird is if it was inconsistent with with your own language. And a lot of these AIs are, again, they're very good at kind of taking what exists in your profile and then generating a response based on the job description. So again, I'm not entirely sure how you would know. I mean, even universities are having a hard time figuring this out. Like they have tried to put in systems to stop students from using generative AI to put in or create term papers or things or essays or things like that. And they're getting a lot of false positives where they've gone to the student and said, aha, you used AI to write this. And the student's like, no, I didn't. I wrote it myself. And and they're being very serious about it. So yeah, it's a really gray area.
Yes. And thank you so much, Michelle Gibson Morgan, for that question. It's Michelle. Michelle is asking the question. But just to add to what you're saying, though, Jeff, is that for me, it's easy for me to spot articles and and quotes that were created by say ChatGPT. I'm going to say easy. There are certain words that so when I see the word delve, for example, or something that says critical, even though we have used those words forever, now when I see them, I automatically think ChatGPT.
So,
and it's not, yes, and I should.
But here's the false positive, though, right?
Yes.
Because if you wrote that yourself and you wrote it and you read it and you passed it through Grammarly, which is not an AI,
right?
And you told Grammarly that you wanted to use more aggressive tones in your writing, it would use those words.
Yes.
And you would have written that entirely and made those changes using Grammarly. Again, Grammarly is not an AI. So you may think that was generated by an AI, but it could have been generated by a person who then used a tool like Grammarly to help them, enhance their writing skills.
Right.
And I honestly don't think I don't see the problem with it, right? I mean, if it's a tool, it's out there.
If we're talking about productivity, then it's there. The other thing, though, that I tell people about the tools is, yes, use them, but customize it. Let it. Sure. I mean, I'll use ChatGPT, for example, to give me some ideas about an article, and sometimes it generates an article, but it's just not me. It's not written in my voice. It doesn't sound like me. But at least it gives me ideas. I then go in and customize it. Sometimes I change the full thing, but at least it gives me some ideas that I probably wouldn't have thought about.
Yeah. So my team does a lot of content writing, right? And so we don't we don't necessarily allow AI to write the content, but we do use AI to create the content calendar. So we'll sit there and say, can you generate a content calendar over the course of a month about this subject for our company? And it'll give you a topic line and a little write-up about what the content should be about, and then a little, usually a CTA at the bottom, a call to action. So it's really helpful that way. But yeah, I agree that sometimes you need to use it as a tool.
And here Michelle is saying there are other software used to track if content is AI generated. Example, Amazon declines ebooks written by AI.
They're, again, true. I would also argue, though, that they probably get some false positives as well, right? Where it is actually written by a person, but the tone is in such a way that it makes it sound like it's an AI. So it's tricky. Again, it's a gray area. I think there's going to be, over the next few years, as the generative AI gets smarter, it's we're going to have to see where that goes.
Right. And I actually I have a resource where that lists some tools to check for plagiarism. And I don't remember how I got them, if it was with my other with the lady who had done the interview. But again, it's we may use AI to generate stuff, but then there are tools out there that will are we copying other people's writing, and how do we give them the credit? So there are a lot of tools that one is called Free AI Text Classifier and Zero GPT and Copy Leaks and all of those that will tell us, at least identify whether you're plagiarizing somebody.
Yeah, that's actually, I was going to bring this up earlier, but I think that's one of the reasons why I stay away from using ChatGPT, right? So I actually don't recommend, if you are using it for corporate purposes, I don't recommend you use ChatGPT at all.
Okay, that's good to know.
There's a huge security risk with ChatGPT. So if you, Daisy, were talking to ChatGPT and producing some content, ChatGPT does not consider that privileged information. And so I could go into ChatGPT and say, give me the same, give me a document and write in the style of Daisy Wright, right? And it would, or I would say, act as Daisy Wright, put your name in quotations, and give me an answer for this. And it will actually go into its memory banks, try and impersonate you based on the information it has about you, and it'll tell me exactly how you would have written this, right? Now, tools like Copilot and Gemini are both protected systems. And so they will not leak your information, your corporate information, outside of your domain. So they're more secure than ChatGPT or Claude or any of these other generative AI platforms which learn collectively. So if you're using it for corporate purposes, stay away from those. Stick with like the big guys, the Copilots, the Geminis, because they'll make sure your information is secured and other people can't go and grab it.
Right. One of the things I do, though, and I'm glad for that point, one of the things I do, even though I use some of these tools and primarily ChatGPT, but I never put anything personal. Because, again, I was listening to a lady once and she was saying, her mother had this condition and she was there putting in information, for them, and ChatGPT gave her, some, good advice and so on. And I said, I would never put anything personal about me on any of these platforms for that matter. But I have I'll just highlight something that Michelle has put here. And it's when we're talking about, I think this one relates to bias. And she's just making a point that it is programmed by humans and based on track records of systems and behavioral trends of the source of the information, including the person's system. So I think she was relating this to the whole part about AI and bias.
About bias, yeah.
Yes.
So again, there's been a lot of debate recently about ethical AI and non-ethical AI and using ethical sources. So a lot of AI and generative AI and GPT as well have really gone out of their way to fall into reputable or ethical AI standards.
Mm-hmm.
I think those standards are probably being set well below, like before the technology. We probably should have set the standards first and then built the technology. Instead, we're going kind of backwards.
Right.
Where we built the technology and now we're kind of catching up with the standards around whether or not it's ethical or not.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think we'll definitely get there. I have a more positive, outlook on, how we'll handle some of this stuff.
Yes, I think, and I agree with you. I do have a more positive outlook as well. But then, we have to be practical, in terms of knowing that, we are entering a space that we're not sure where it's going.
For sure.
And it can be intimidating. It can be frightening. And, I have a lady who I mentored, and she's into AI, but from the governance perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And because, again, organizations, corporations, will have to set up some framework around governance, around, the ethical use of
Absolutely.
things like these. So, so listen, it's 1:57. I don't know where the time has. Thank you so much, Michelle, for participating. And any last words, Jeff? And if anybody wants to connect with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think the LinkedIn profile is profile/Jeff J Webb. Connect with me on LinkedIn. If you ever have any questions, you can always just, reach out, message me there. But it was a pleasure chatting today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm trying to get this piece off my screen, but it's not.
You had your final thoughts on there.
I know. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate you spending time, with me. And our Instagram didn't work, and it's probably my lack of
That's
knowledge
okay.
there.
Try
That's how we learn, right?
Yeah.
That's how we learn, and we'll do it the next time really well. But thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate your time. And have a great weekend.
Yes, you too. All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Good. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.